talk now about Bobby Fischer's way of setting up traps. You see, I think that Fischer was incredible at making sure that he sets up the most challenging type of traps while at the same time keeping a great position of power. So that even if the opponent did not fall for it, he would still be able to maintain a grand position for playing. The game we're going to see was played between Bobby Fischer and his opponent named Bednarski. It was played in the Havana Olympiad in 1966. And I really loved the game and all the subtleties that came with it. Basically, the way it started was e4, c5, a very simple opening. Then knight of 3, d6, d4, c takes d4, and knight takes d4. Yeah, so white is just controlling or setting up a good control over the center. After that, black played knight of 6, knight c3, and a6. So this was actually well played. He just brought up the pieces. This is the Najdorf, typical Najdorf for black. Pretty good system for playing. After the move of pawn a6 as it was, okay, then white picked up to do bishop to the c4. Actually chose it very well. Bishop c4, that's the Sulzin attack, and it's an incredibly dangerous type of system for black because it doesn't let him to play moves like d5 or b5 by any means. And it is quite good either way. So, after the move of bishop to the c4 got played, essentially black, since he cannot play e5, he played e6, hoping to get ready for bishop e7. So white plays bishop b3. Now this doesn't really look like a system that's setting up any serious traps to black. To white. Black is developing, he's getting ready to play with bishop to the e7, and he's just okay. It would look very much like an okay position. Nothing scary is definitely going to happen. So that's what black was relying on. Of course, white, there's knight to the d7 move that comes through. He's also pretty good with the development of his pieces. He's going to prepare himself for bishop to the e7, likely short castles. It's a very, very good approach. Very good. Right after that, of course, the question is what to do now. So I'd like you to think for a second and sort of make a decision for yourself what you would like to do. I have to admit that the bishop from the b3 looks really great. The pawn too. So most of our pieces have a strong value that we need them to have. But it's still about how. It's still really about in what way do we make this better. How to make this position stand out. First thing, start with something active. Do not start with something big. Start with something active. You'll see this actually becoming very powerful in that way. White does not want to necessarily break through the black position. It's not about that at all. What it is about is making sure that we get enough space. By taking control of the square of e5, we surely get a little more space. We do not put ourselves in any risk, and things start to look better, a lot better. Now after f4, black plays knight at the c5 himself. He's actually pretty good here. He wants to just make sure that there's the attack, there's the challenge against the pawn, and without any doubt that looks good. Of course, as it happened, surely white is having no problem with that. He plays alongside f5. And this is where the trap came. Black should have just played normally with the move of bishop to the e7. Consider castling next move to hide his king. And really do things as they should be done. If you did that, I think that there would have been no problem. An easy game. And a good play by black would have come out of this. Absolutely. unfortunately, black did not realize the danger. What he thought was, okay, white's attacking, that's for sure, but nothing yet is going on. I mean, if white does not really happen to have that many tactics or that many threats, why do I have to bother? So why don't I just play knight takes d4, capturing this pawn and really assigning my knight a powerful place. See, this is the trap. Now, see, it's a very natural trap, because if black didn't do it, white would still have a very good and active position. You always want to think about towards these kinds of traps, like how do you make a natural, a solid trap, letting your opponent to sort of make the to jump or attack or whatever. So in here, knight takes to d4 was a trap, but what kind? Why is this a trap, really? Why is it even supposed to be? Well, first of all, because it delays the development. Most important thing about such positions is think and make sure you do not delay the development. If you delay the development, that delay is going to be the worst thing that can happen. Delaying the development is a bad idea. And I think that's what black did not realize at this point, that this delays it. So what comes out next after the capture? Do we attack him? Do we wait? What do we do? It's a great question. Well, first of all, we play f takes to the e6. Now white's going to get to embrace a variation that gives him a huge advantage in the long run. But I want you to see why it happens. Because it's not just about, oh, hey, white's attacking. And that's true, he's attacking. But it's much deeper than that. There's a reason why he's so successful. And let's investigate. After the move of f takes to the e6, black plays queen h4 check. Now, of course, you could see why. The rest of the moves really don't work. Whatever else he would do, like say f takes to the e6, white would play knight takes d4, knight takes to the e4, short castles, and this whole sequence just turns out terribly bad. He's going to have to worry about the queen on h6. He's going to have to worry about queen h5. He's going to have to worry about all the other things coming in, and so that would be pretty painful. So you could understand now that black just didn't really feel very comfortable enduring all that. So in some way, black committed himself already. So what's wrong? I mean, if you really get to think about it, it looks like white is the one who's got all the problems. Black seems to be the one to be attacking, just the one to do all the damage and all the threats and everything. So why is this any sort of an issue? It's because of the nature of the attack. You see, a player always needs preparation, setup, kind of a development that is supposed to back up all these moves. Black right now lacks this. He's got some pieces, but the truth is that most of them are backward. Even the queen is, the queen, okay, is kind of advanced, but it's going to be challenged and all this. So you have to remember that. The rule always happens to be thinking about, what the sort of preparation is like. And it's just when it's not there, which is the case here, white can just play g3, knight takes g3, and it's a good exercise. What do you think white must do right now? Fischer knew very well that this position is going to happen. So what he must have found is a way to continue, a way to conduct, a good challenge or a problem versus black. So the only question is how. Of course, we find out with the very next move that white is playing, and it is knight f3. Brilliant. It's a great move that forces the black queen to move out of the way, but it's also brilliant because once the queen moves down, white plays e takes f7, king d8, and rook g1. And suddenly we realize, okay, black is definitely not losing, but he doesn't have anything. His knight's going to be pushed back. the rest of his pieces are going to be forced away. He is already in a very difficult position just because of that. See, I find it to be most interesting how people believe they could start an attack and make it work without thinking about the preparation, the consequences of what if my opponent's a little bit more prepared, and now we could see the real trouble. Black has no preparation that can match White's extra development and the power of his pieces. It was great. Well, Black was worried, so he played knight f5, coming back. But it didn't matter, because now White is in condition to counter. He could do it so successfully and so well with every move he's got. That's a great play. Well, with that in mind, obviously there's bishop g5, and there's so much more. So knight d5 led to a simple move of queen takes f7, hoping to simplify and makes a couple of exchanges. But then White just plays bishop g5. He continues with the inevitable tactics that flow against Black's position, and especially against his king. It's great. King e8, and then we have queen e2 with a check. I mean, really, this is it's just a matter of a couple of moves, really. But you just look at this. Look and compare what White could do and achieve with his pieces. Every single force that he has already gotten, it's only there because of the preparation, because of the setup. And I gotta say that Black has very little to do. He played that kind of move, hoping that this will save him, but really didn't, at least not in the way he wanted. So after bishop e6, White plays knight f4. Remember this, the pressure is everything, and you do it by constantly making problems again and again and again. And you could see that happening right now beautifully. It's a constant problem, one after the other, that just doesn't seem to stop. It's not really like going to stop anywhere soon. So what comes out next? Knight f4, king d7. Apparently Black didn't have much to do. He had to move his king to the d7 square. But, in that case, surely White's ready to go on and continue. He plays with the move of long side castles beautifully. So now we've got the rook 2, we've got the queen, we've got the knight, and we're going to get probably the other rook as the time, shows it. So we've got a move like rook to the d1 to be created very quickly. It's beautiful. What I love about this position is just how it suddenly, pops for White. Everything he wanted to achieve from the earlier position is already here. And that's because of Black's trap, or rather the provocation that we've created, that he attended, just going for the tactics, without any real setup or backing it up. This is a beautiful thing. See, so remember that in most times you want to let him jump or provoke him to jump like this, because that's what's going to give you the advantage. And so with that, Black played queen to the e8. Of course, bishop takes the c, bishop takes to the e. It is an extra problem that Black has to resolve right now. It's certainly not an easy one too. It's beautiful for White. So there we go. Now bishop takes to the e6, knight takes to the e6, and of course after that exchange and the recapture, this was a good time when White could continue. He played with the move of queen e4. You have to understand that in order to carry on your attack further and make it stronger with every single move, you need that type of activity. Activity means making sure that you get your pieces as further advanced as they possibly can get. And that's what we got to do. Just that move with the queen right up was brilliant. It attacks b7, but more importantly, Black can't protect it all that well due to the knight. So it basically creates more of a double attack, both against the f5 and the b7, and it's wonderful. Well, that's true. Black played g6, knight takes to d6, and then he resigned because, well, there's no real way on how Black could get out. I love this gambit, this type of line that White chose. We can't call it necessarily a gambit, but it was so beautiful because it was it was effective. It was it was working out quite nicely, and it gave white a strong opportunity. Every single move that was being made in this position, or in that whole opening for white, led to a very simple thing. Threat, 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 another threat, and another threat, and another threat. Just, that's how I say people should not treat the opening. You don't want to treat the opening quickly. White developed, and he sort of set the bait for black to, capture. The knight takes to the e4 move was just a very big bait. He shouldn't have done that. He shouldn't have actually started even with this. Knight c5 was okay, but the other one was not. And so this is very important. The rule number one about most of these positions is give yourself the time. Give yourself the opportunity to finish up the development, and then you start. Now, there's another game that my father found to be one of the most beautiful games Bobby Fischer has ever played, and it has to do a lot with the opening. It has to do with evaluating how you could make a better opening and setting up a successful trap against your opponent. I want to show it to you. So Fischer was playing with black's pieces versus Robert Byrne. Now, this is a really interesting game to talk about. So basically the way it started was d4 and knight f6, c4, g6, g3, and c6. So what Fischer decided to do was the Slav. That's why white should have waited, should have played a little more flexibly, letting the black bishop to come on g7 and the d6 to follow, so that black commits to the king Scythian. Now this is actually an interesting structure. See, remember the pawn structure must always affect in one way or another the piece activity. So right now black is going to situate the pawn structure in such a way so that it could actually affect white's bishop. The bishop that white's going to have is going to feel really not so good on the g2. And after black blocks it, he could really carry on a pretty good development. So it was good. After the move c6, white played bishop to the g2, just getting on with that, following through with a nice development. He's wanting to step up with the with the bishop. But then, of course, black is ready. He's prepared for that. And what he did was simply d5. Perfect. It's a very good move. Once again, we are actually blockading the bishop, but we're also preparing ourselves for some more action. Like once the bishop is blocked, I think that it is the first thing. There is lots of good moves to follow afterwards. After this, I think with the move of short castles, bishop g7, short castles, bishop f5, and so on. This does look quite good. So what happens next? After that, white played c6 to the d. Okay, c6 to the d, c6 to the d, and then after c6 d, c6 d, white does knight c3, bishop g7, and pawn to e3 in this case. It closes the bishop, I have to admit, so it's not that perfect. But then black plays short castle, knight e2, and now we have a really interesting question. What is black supposed to do next? Great question. See, as you could find out, white's last couple of moves were not that great. He wasn't supposed to be playing e3, knight e2. And when he does it, it all together looks very passive, let's face it. It's not a very good opening. But white did it anyway. He probably just wanted to have a nice formation with a light square bishop open, and he didn't care so much about the qualities in the center. So what is black supposed to do right here, right now? It's a great question. Well, first thing, we're supposed to simply carry on an easy development. I always say that. So just think about that. If you get the development to work out, it will be a really good thing, because if you go for it, you could really arrange your pieces, you can make them up. So knight c6, wonderfully played. White castles short, and then black just plays with the move of pawn to the b6. He's also getting ready to develop his light square bishop over to a6 so that he could pin us. He can pin the knight, and things look good. most of white's own forces a little bit on the backside. Black is really ready to do it, and he makes it look good. So b3 was played, and then black did bishop a6, bishop a3, and rook e8. Now you may wonder, okay, is this really all that great for black? I mean, is black going to do anything special? I like the development because of the pin that's on the e2, because of the fact that white is definitely not doing all too great. So black sets up a really good structure. He would actually like to develop it and make it a little bit stronger, but it's pretty good so far. White plays queen d2. So let's think a little bit about this. What is black supposed to do right now? I mean, we've got a great looking bishop, have a good pin that's being created, and of course we do have the fact that most of white's pieces are just being not so much passive, but rather undeveloped, universally backward, you could call that too. It's whatever you say. He is not perfect. So how do we play this? Fischer knew that in order to become most successful within any opening line, the first thing that you must have is the ability to control the center. So in that aspect, as you could see, controlling the center just makes one thing possible, and that is the move of e5. I have to say that's a really brilliant idea, but is also good because in case of the exchange and the retake, we're going to have a wonderful play. Step in, challenge, or threaten the opponent. It's perfect. As an idea, this looks very risky. I mean, let's face it. This move instantly opens up the line for white to attack the pawn on the d5, so it just looks kind of crazy at first. But then you realize that it's not actually that crazy. And the reason is because after e5, in case white plays with a move of d6 to the e5, he's opening a challenge or a threat versus our pawn on the d5. And, so this is a great idea. Beautiful, efficient, and really strong all the while. And so after the move of d6 to the e5, black just plays knight takes to the e5 perfectly. He doesn't have to worry about, tactics or anything else. We're able to set up our pieces and have them well. Let's do it. So what to do next? Actually, as soon as this is played, things look terrific. There's no danger. Everything looks great. See, the secret in a position just like that is making sure you can get enough pieces, enough of a good development. And when you do, it's so easy. Right now, that's exactly what black wanted. He just needed to make sure every piece gets strong, active, well placed. It's all there. So, what is happening right now? How do we play it next? Well, now we gotta defend, and we have to defend a very specific kind of a move that white's up to. He is going for the move of rook after the d1, intending very nice and simple challenge over the d5. This is scary, really, really scary. So what do we do? The problem with the pawn down there is big. We cannot easily just say, all right, I'm going to try this move. It's a scary thing to experience that. So, what to do? How to plan it ahead? Very powerful question. See, if you're ever in such a position, what I recommend you to do is think about one idea. How can I be more active? See, activity is a difficult thing to achieve. But the real deal is that you could always try to be active by simply following the idea to get your pieces more advanced. If you do this, I guarantee you this type of development you're going to get will be perfect. And black played knight d3. Now, everybody would love to go for that. I mean, open up the position, get the pieces ready. Fischer did that, and he was very, comfortable with that. So, do we do it? I mean, it does look pretty good. So, what white played, or he picked up to do actually, was pretty interesting. He did the move of queen c2. Going forward, trying to challenge over the d3 knight. Makes a lot of sense. Does make a lot of sense. So what's black supposed to do now? Great question. If you ever find yourself in a position like this, remember that you've got to be looking at the most active, aggressive, or threatening moves that you could do. So it's not an easy idea, but you must be thinking about those. The more forcingly you could choose to play, the more successful your strategy is going to be, but it's not an easy thing. So how to do that? The next move is the perfect answer. Knight takes f2. It looks like a sacrifice, but what it really is, what it really does, is to completely break down white's pawn protection. And before you know it, after the move of knight takes to the f2, king takes f2, and knight g4 check, we've got a brilliant tactical sequence that simply kills him. It is so wonderful that he cannot escape. Now, in the game, during the game when it was played, in the analysis hall, different commentators and grandmasters thought that Fischer made a mistake. And this is actually interesting because they would look at the position, they would say, all right, we have a top grandmaster like Fischer, just mess up the game by making an incorrect sacrifice. It's not like it never happened. But did he really make a mistake? Did he really mess it up all that badly? Well, not really. If you want to practice on this position yourself, one thing I will encourage you to do is to pause this video and try to figure it out. Try to really think through this situation yourself in order to find out what's possibly there, what could be there. Now, again, that doesn't mean that you'll find out something big, but you want to be able to try and train on this. So what was Fischer's real goal with the actual sacrifice? The idea behind it was simple. As black captures the e3 very quickly, point is that now after the move king to the g1, white can play this, and then we can understand that kind of idea. The concept being, let's hit him, and let's hit him hard. What's come out next is perfect. Knight takes the e3, then essentially white played alongside the move of king. Then there is the move of knight takes g2. Beautiful. The one and only protector around the white king, which happened to be the bishop, is presently removed. We don't have to worry about anything. Without the bishop, he is no longer going to be able to defend the king, keep it together, or have a good game. One of the biggest things, one of the biggest principles of a successful strategy is to think of a follow-up. If you're going to, if you're not going to sacrifice, that's okay. You don't have to be worried. But if you're ever going to think of an actual sacrifice, you have to be thinking about, the follow-through, continuation. And with knight takes to the g2, king takes to the g2, this was the time where black played d4 perfectly. Great move. Now we're ready to come out with a move like, say, bishop to the b7 check. And then we've got the possibility to shoot at the white king, come forward, and deliver a lot of different threats. So d4 check, knight takes d4, bishop to the b7. See, by including the bishop on a powerful position, placing it up against the white king, and realizing all sorts of different tactics out there, we make it happen. And we make it happen because now white's got to go right down, back at the f1 with his king, which simply leads to queen d7. The light square bishop's up and open. Queen h3 is ready. The dark square bishop is advanced. Now I understand that white is a piece down. That happens. And yet, the only thing that matters here is, do we have the continuation? Is there a follow-up to that type of thing? The follow-up is, definitely there. But more importantly, it's that without the main defender, which was actually the bishop on the g2, white simply cannot hold that position. He can't do it. Beautiful. Queen d7. Then white plays actually king to the g1. Queen f2, sorry. And then there's queen h3 check, king g1. And the question is what to do next. I mean, we got a great queen. We have a wonderful dark square bishop, light square bishop. Even the dark square bishop is actually ready and well set into play. So really, it comes down to that big query. So we have the queen. We've got the the bishops. We've got the rook. We've got the white king that's extremely exposed. How do we take advantage of this position? See, if you have any kind of attack, remember the key rules. The first key rule always happens to be, think about the main target, the major target. Clearly now the white king. Second, think about how many pieces do you have involved. The rook, the two bishops, and the queen. And finally, think about open lines. Have you got enough? Yes, we do. We've got quite a few lines against white's king. If you got all of these things, the only thing that's required at last is to find out what is the main defender. It's like I always say it. The main defender being in this position is actually the queen. And so if the queen is removed, we're basically going to be checkmating him in no time. So how do we do that? Take a second. Think about it. All of this was a very huge plan by black to take advantage and lead white into this position. But what to do now? How to continue here? Of course, we can't play bishop takes to the d4 because there's going to be the move of rook takes to the d4, so he'll be quite safe. However, we could just as well do the move of rook e1 check. Surely taking the e1 with this queen is not going to help due to the bishop takes d4. But more importantly, after rook takes to the e, we've got the move of bishop takes to the d, and it just kills him. It's a wonderful setup. Really wonderful variation. Apparently, there's no chance for him to escape right here. And then after queen takes to the d4, we've got queen g2 following a checkmate. Beautifully played. Strong, consistent, and super great. Think about that. Always ask yourself, what am I attacking with, and what's my opponent's main defender? What is he using as main guardians towards his defense? Find that, and I guarantee you'll always know what you've got to do. You'll always have a clear idea of the best moves to follow. So that was a great example by Fischer. What other examples we could say about him trapping up the opponent? Now, this is a really quick game that was played by Fischer in his young years. It was played between Fischer and Sherwin, 1957, East Orange. And it basically started with e4, c5, knight f3, d3, g3, and bishop g2. So white really got this easy-looking development with basically no problems as it came. So it was pretty good. Okay, after that move, there was the move of short castles, knight d2, and rook to the b8. Basically, black's idea being is just to set up the pieces and get them ready towards the idea of b5. So it was a fine move. Now, what Fischer relied on is that in order to trap your opponent, oftentimes you need to do this more positionally. That means tactical traps rarely work unless they're very specific in a particular opening or something. But there are the so-called positional traps, which more or less means just setting the opponent up in a bad or in a difficult structure with, issues. And so, oftentimes that's more necessary, that's more dangerous. Let's take a look and see how that happened now in this game. After the move of rook to b8, white plays rook e1, a typical move, sort of setting himself up for the e5 move. It's a great idea. And so actually black played now the rook e1, pawn to the d6. Made a lot of sense to play that type of move in order to, just get some control. And of course, after that type of a move, now white is playing with c3. Now, this looks like a very harmless type of development. I mean, white isn't really intending to do anything too special. He's not, going forward with anything, dangerous. So, what's the trouble? After the move c3, white's creating the hidden intention of playing the move of pawn to, d4. If this happens, there's going to be more than just a nice looking idea. It's going to be a pretty valuable tactic. The pawn's going to go forward. It's just going to be helping white to control a lot of extra space. That's a big deal. See, I think black realized that, and that's one of the reasons why he actually played it a bit differently. But again, let's talk about what really came through here. After the move of c3, black played with b6 and d4. Now, there's a rule, and the rule says never let your opponent to control the center. Now, why is that so important? It's because controlling the center essentially allows a lot of great possibilities to occur. And, it's a long-term advantage, something that's going to stand out for quite some time. So we could see that with that last move that was being done, black is definitely having a problem. So it's a pretty devastating almost kind of position. So what's coming up next? Well, actually, soon as this was played, black did queen to the c7 himself. And after the queen to c7, there was e5. You can see Fischer seizing the opportunity to control the center because black didn't seem to be that careful about it. It's a great idea. Control the center. Now black takes the knight to d5. There's an exchange, knight e4, and knight takes d6. The command in the middle helped white to get a lot of extra control, but it was just that negligence of black around the middle that gave white a beautiful breakthrough, and now the chance to further follow it up with an attack on the king's side. So it's a great way to go for. Knight g5, knight e7, queen c2. Black plays knight to the g, and there's h4. It's amazing how fast Fischer does all of that. It's just like every move literally comes as an almost an inevitable threat. Black played knight here, capture. Of course, taking with the king would lead to bishop f4, which loses. So he took back with the knight. But then white plays h5, and now we see the real trouble here. It's not just, hey, that's bad. There's a lot more coming on as soon as white has just made that type of sacrifice. The f4 square is definitely going to fall, but there's so much more to it. There's so much more that white can prove and succeed with. So essentially after that last move, of course black worried a lot. He didn't like the idea, didn't like the possibility, the fact that he would suffer because of this. And he played with knight h4, but then after bishop f4, white was already winning. And I have to admit, it's one of the best ideas to exploit the opponent by attacking his weaknesses in such a fast manner. But really, I love the white strategy. Think about this. Setting up a positional trap is much more important. And you could consider taking the ideas like slowing down his development or provoking him to start advancing, or simply, like making him not care about the center, which he really didn't care so much about. All of these, they actually combined and gave white a brilliant advantage as it came out and followed up in the next moves.